Hello, 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 and welcome to this class today, where I'm going to be sharing with you how you can create new beliefs. So, we've been talking a lot about the beliefs we've created, the narratives we've created. We've talked about why we've created them, when we first started feeling them, what they are, how we feel about these stories. And we have begun the process of rewriting our story, which we continue basically in the processes that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So, how can we create new beliefs? So, in creating new beliefs, the most important thing you will need to remind yourself of is that your current beliefs around whatever theme you're working with are false. Just because you believe something, it doesn't make it true. This work is about confronting our beliefs and deciding from a grounded, rational, and logical perspective, is this true or is this a false narrative I've created at some point to survive, to keep myself safe, whatever that is? They are not true. Your brain will not accept this at first. And we talked a lot about the brain and how that all works. But it's up to you to train your mind, not the other way around. It's up to us to become intentional. It's up to us to consciously choose instead of letting the brain run on autopilot and the subconscious. So, so you must consistently banish the doubts that will arise and the challenges your mind. And I'm so sorry. So you need to banish those doubts and continuously challenge your mind to see things differently. How can I see this in a new way? How can I see this differently so that I feel better about this? Okay. Once you have physically written your new story in your shadow work journal, as I mentioned to you when we were talking about that, now you want to get familiar with it. You want to get really familiar. So hopefully you're doing your visualization. Okay, that's so important. That's a really powerful part. So now we're going to tackle it from a different angle today, okay? Because let's face it, when we are in the middle of our lives, let's say you're in the car and you get triggered by your spouse, which is something you're really working on in your shadow work journey, or your partner, you can't very well just say, okay, I'm closing my eyes to visualize the image that I've created around this new story. We don't have time to do that all day long. The visualization is something you want to do when you've carved out time, and hopefully you're doing that every day, like we talked about. Um, but hopefully you're carving out time every day for this work. So this method that we're going to be working with today is a way for you to instantly interrupt that thought, okay? Interrupt the unhelpful thought with something that embodies your new story. And I'm going to get into what that something is here in a moment, okay? So, but you do need to be very aware and have a really good understanding of what your new story is. What does your life look like in your new story? How do you feel in your new story? What is the purpose of telling this new story? What goals is your new story leading you towards accomplishing? And once you have this basic understanding of each story, so whatever story you're currently working with, because remember, we're taking each theme one at a time. We're not writing 5 new stories at once. We're actually just putting all of our focus on one theme, one story at a time. Once you master that story, or have it mostly mastered, because like I said, this can be an ongoing journey, then it's safe to move on to the next theme, the next story, the next narrative that needs rewiring and in basic terms. Um, so once you have an understanding of the current story you're working with, you're going to create a few mantras or affirmations that summarize the main aspects of the new story. So I'm sure some of you are rolling your eyes, or whatever it is around this idea of affirmations and mantras. Don't worry, I have a whole class on why affirmations work, and some people feel they are useless, that maybe will help shift anyone who isn't a believer in affirmations a little bit. But for now, I'm just asking you to trust me and to again challenge your current belief system. If you are one of those people that I see constantly in my newsfeed on Facebook that kind of share this message of affirmations as being useless, because they most certainly are not useless, and they play a really important role when it comes to biologically reprogramming the mind. And I think that's what people don't understand. And again, I'm going to get into that much more deeply in the next class, but just know that people who struggle to believe that affirmations and mantras can work, it's because they don't understand the way the biological brain works. It's as simple as that. And once you have that understanding, which hopefully you're starting to get a better understanding of all of that, then it like makes sense why this actually works. But again, that is for our next class. So I'm not going to digress too deep into that right now. So when it comes to creating your affirmations and mantras, it's best if you create these yourself. But if you do need some inspiration, you can always go to Google and look for some common affirmations around what you're working for. So if your theme is around money, look for money affirmations. If your theme is around self-love, you're going to want to look for self-love affirmations. If your theme is around judgment, you're going to want to look for affirmations that help you to not judge other people, etc. Um, Once you've created a handful of mantras and affirmations, write them out, post them around you, keep them handy, post-it notes, write them on your mirrors, put them in your journal, just any place you're going to see these so they become kind of so you can remember them basically. So you're seeing them enough and you're working with these mantras and affirmations enough that you're actually seeing them and you're remembering them. I'm sorry, is what I meant to say. So how this next process works is each time you recognize that old narrative showing up, you're going to interrupt it with one of your new mantras and affirmations. So the mantra affirmation basically is a shortened, condensed version of your story in one or two sentences, okay? Something that portrays the message of that story, that feels like that story, but you've condensed it down into just a few sentences, two at the max, really. One or two sentences, okay? And so here's how this works. So you have your mantras and you're thinking something, and I'm going to go ahead and like share a story with you about when I first started using this process many years ago. But I obviously, as an abuse survivor of sexual abuse and rape and physical abuse in a dysfunctional home that I grew up in with an alcoholic father, all of these things, lots of childhood trauma there. Obviously, I created stories about myself that were less than loving. And I used to call myself stupid a lot. And I would say it joking. That's the thing. Oh, I'm so stupid. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Right. A lot of these things we say sarcastically about ourselves are really insight to true feelings we have. But I used to have all of these unloving thoughts about myself. I'm worthless. I hate myself. I'm of no value to this world. Like these are things I used to think. It like hurts my heart. I almost started crying right now because these stories, it's getting me emotional because these stories are so far from my reality now. To even think that this is a way that I talked about myself, it like hurts my heart now. So if that's not a testament to how powerful these exercises are, I don't know what is, because you obviously can see that I'm having an emotional reaction because it's so far from my current belief system about myself. But when I first started this process, I had a handful of mantras that were loving mantras, things like I'm deserving of everything and anything I desire. I love myself without condition. I'm worthy without condition. My past behavior doesn't define my future self. These are all affirmations that I worked with to help me with this self-love aspect. And what happens is when we are telling these old stories, I would get through the entire story. Oh, I'm so worthless. Here I am again, blah, 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 whatever that story was. And then I would remember, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm worthy of everything and anything and everything I desire. I am loved without condition. I'm worthy without condition. I would tell that, I would mentally and silently to myself, and if I was alone, sometimes out loud, repeat that affirmation. Okay. So when we are telling these stories, you're likely going to get through the whole story before you remember to tell your affirmation. That's fine. Follow it up with your affirmation or mantra. Even if you said the whole thing and you felt the whole gamut of it, follow it up with your affirmation. Okay. What you see happening is that in time, you're creating a habit around this affirmation. So now you're connecting this old story with this new story. So every time you remember to tell your new story in the form of this affirmation, the brain makes that connection between the two stories. And so you're going to start remembering your affirmation sooner. So you might get all the way through your story at first, and then you say your affirmation, which feels so counterproductive. Do it anyways. Trust me. Trust me, trust me, trust me. I'm leading you down the right path on this. Um, but in time, you might notice like, oh, I got halfway through my story before I remembered to interrupt it. Oh, I just began telling that story and then I interrupted it with my narrative. And eventually, guess what? You get to a point where you no longer tell the old story for the most part. So be patient with yourself during this process, and it's going to feel like it's not working. You might get frustrated because you're like, what's the point in telling this new story? I already went through the whole gamut of emotions associated with the old story. I already said the whole thing. Say it anyways and watch what happens. Be consistent like you are with everything else. And in time, you will begin interrupting yourself with the new narrative sooner and sooner and sooner until one day you realize that the only voice in your head now and the only story you're telling is the new story. That old story has effectively been starved out of the brain, out of the soul, out of the mind. Okay. So your greatest challenge in this process is going to be believing the new story you're creating and saying it consistently and telling it, okay? And that's okay if you don't believe it at first. Keep saying it in time. Once it becomes habitual, your brain is going to accept this new story as truth, and everything in your life is going to be reflective of the new story. But it's not going to happen overnight, guys. None of this stuff does. None of this happens overnight. All of this takes time. All of this takes patience. All of this takes radical self-love, radical self-compassion. Okay. Um, because the mind isn't going to accept it at first. You may feel disheartened or even like none of this is even working, but you must push through and commit before starting to not give any space to that kind of thinking. So that's just another unhelpful narrative that you might see show up that you have to interrupt. None of this is working. What's the point anyways? I didn't get instant results. What's the point anyways? I woke up feeling today the same way I did yesterday. What's the point anyways? We hear so much about quantum leaps, quantum jumps, downloads, blah, 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 blah. All of this pressure basically on people to have these instant up levels, these instant like shifts and changes. Unfortunately, it's all bullshit. Excuse my language, but this is the truth. I'm not saying we don't quantum jump according to what I feel that is, but I'm not going to get into all that. But yes, our lives can make these huge shifts, but it rarely happens in an instant. These huge shifts are usually the cause of many small steps, lots of patience, and lots of time. All right. So get rid of this idea that we're supposed to experience everything instantly. We experience things in small, gradual progression. Okay. So you've got to already say, I'm not giving any room to those negative thoughts about it's not working. Instead, I'm just going to try. I'm just going to try to be consistent. I'm just going to not give up. I'm just going to stick with it and just see. Because what does it hurt just to see? If what you're doing was working for you, you likely wouldn't be sitting here with me now. So obviously, it's time to challenge those beliefs that you've been having and any beliefs that show up around these methods that say they're not working. Give it time. Be patient. Okay. Push past everything, stick with it. And even if you do fall out of consistency, like we all do sometimes, don't let that be your excuse for not getting back up and starting over. Don't let that be your excuse for just walking away from it all. Okay. This is the difference between people who are successful in all areas of life and people who aren't. It's not that successful people have an edge up. It's not that they have an easier life, because trust me, they don't. It's that they're consistent and they don't give up when things get hard. They don't give up when they quote unquote fail. Failure, like losing consistency, doesn't keep them from getting up and starting again or trying again or tackling it from a different way. So to be successful in any area of your life, these principles are vital. So you need to be willing to get up and re-begin these processes as many times as necessary until the consistency has created such a habit that you do these things on autopilot. So get your affirmations created. That is your homework. Get in your journal, start creating your affirmations, touch them around, and I will see you in the next class.